Hello and welcome to the Final Straight F1 podcast. Again here with me, Ben, and
Thunder. Well, Australian Grand Prix, what did you think?
well, I think the drama began really even before the qualifying and race begun, because we had Logan Sargent, not being able to participate in the qualifying and race, which was a pretty big moment. What did you think of that?
Well, no, that was really shocking. I mean, the situation of Williams with the way James Vowles handles the team. He's been seen as this very data-driven and collected, calm team principal, and I felt like he's doing a good job. But I mean, Albon crashed at the exact same spot as he did last year, which is pretty funny already. But then they've been saying that they took a risk and they only have a limited number of chassis for the first few races, to get an advantage later on. But now they're paying the high price, and they weren't able to fix the car in time for both of them to run. So they decided to just take Sargent's car and put Albon in it and just have him drive. Which, I mean, imagine being Logan Sargent in that. Like, they released the statements, all of them. James Vowles, Albon, Sargent, and I just have to. It has to be super fucking tough for Sargent.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I think many people just didn't really, make a lot about it because it's Williams, right? It's not a top team, but it was not Sargent's fault. It was Albon's fault. Funnily enough, as you say, in the same spot as last year.
Yeah.
But I mean, in terms of the performance, I mean, it makes sense. Of course, if you have to put a probability of who's going to deliver the points. In this case, you have to stand with James Vowles, right? It's pretty obvious that it's Albon at this point. But I was just thinking, and I was thinking about how if this would happen in one of the top teams, of course, if it was in Red Bull, it would be pretty clear who would have gotten the car.
Yeah.
But if you look at Mercedes, right? If it happened, do you think that, for example, if Hamilton crashed and he would crack the chassis and it would have to be decided whether Russell or Hamilton would race, do you think they would give it to Hamilton or Russell, or what would you think would happen in this situation? Because I think it's a crazy scenario.
Yeah, I really don't think it could happen anywhere else in any other team. Because as I said, James Vowles is very data-driven, analytical. So I think that he is just trying to maximize the potential of the team and get the most points with what he has. So I get the thought process, but this is going to be a huge hit to Sargent's confidence for the rest of the season as well. Oh, well, I guess I'm not good enough to even drive my own car. So it's tough.
Yep. Plus, he needs the miles.
And I mean,
he needs the miles.
Yeah.
He just needs to drive and get close to Albon. Because I think, when you look at practice, I don't think he was that far off. He was not doing bad. But yeah, it's a difficult situation to be in. And it's, Williams kind of made the situation very difficult for themselves, but not even producing a third and reserve chassis. Because that is, something that you would not expect to happen in this modern era of Formula One. So I think that was a pretty big one even before the Grand Prix really started.
And Sargent was the last one to get announced last year as well. He's not an easy split to begin with. His contract got renewed at the last minute. And who knows if he's going to stay there for another season, right? I mean, he has to perform better, but I don't think this is going to help him achieve that, to be honest.
He's under pressure, right? Yeah. He just needs to deliver some solid points. He needs to deliver also because of, look at Haas, right? Haas has delivered definitely. And had an amazing weekend, in terms of how it ended up, double points. That is pretty amazing. And when you have 0 points on the board, which I think Williams has right now, and Haas already has 4 points in the since the top 5 teams are so close, that's even what James Vowles mentioned, that 1 point at the end of the year could make the difference between being 6th or 10th, right? So it is super important to just get the points under the belt when the, big teams don't score. So like, you had Verstappen getting out of the race, having a problem. You had Hamilton retiring. You had Russell crashing out. So you had 3 of the big boys, not finishing. And Haas took full advantage of that. So props to them. Yeah.
And we did see Magnussen and Albon fight. I think it was Magnussen for the last point, but Albon, he ended up P11, which, I mean, it's still a decent result, but I don't know if looking back now, if it was worth it to switch the cars.
Yeah, well, it's difficult. Like, hindsight is a beautiful thing, right? Like, if we knew in 2021 what we know now, probably Mercedes in Abu Dhabi would have pitted Hamilton. But these things just, you just never cannot comprehend like what's going to happen. Like, I think Albon also had a pretty big pressure to deliver, like, because he made a mistake, and because of him, Sargent couldn't race, and arguably it could have cost them as well, because I think the Haas, did they start ahead of the Williams? They did, right?
I think so. I'm not sure right now, but
because if there was a second car, like, for sure, I think that, because look, like, Albon's strategy was that he had to undercut every single stint, right? He had to just undercut. Because for some reason, the tires were shredding fairly fast in terms of their speed. I think it's maybe because of the softer compounds as compared to the last year. But still, like, Albon had to pit so much earlier just to, like, gain an advantage and being able to stay with these guys. And it was a difficult one for Williams, because normally I think last year it was a good track for them and they had a pretty good chance.
Yeah.
So it's surprising not to see them doing well this year, especially because of their straight line speed. But I guess that's something that it was their last year's car, like, main strength. But this year it seems they're more balanced, and we could see them maybe better at like the more traditional circuits.
Yeah. Well, we'll see where it goes. But as you've already mentioned some of the other big, topics of the weekend, but then we had the qualifying session, which I think a lot of people expected Charles Leclerc to dominate. Or, I mean, not dominate, but to get very close to pole, if not get pole, because he's been on front row for what is it, seven races in a row?
Yeah, something like that. And some of those were poles, right? So
yeah. So, but he did mention that he felt, even in FP3, he didn't feel as comfortable with the car as FP2. And then in qualifying, he waited for the confidence to get back in Q3, but it just didn't. And he aborted the last attempt. And he got P5. I mean, which turned into P4 due to the Perez penalty. But still, out-qualified by Carlos Sainz. Again, where it mattered, Carlos Sainz delivered, which...
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that when we were looking at the, preseason tests, and maybe even before, there were so many rumors that Leclerc is, like, very happy with how the car is changing from last year, right? So that it's become more oversteery and that it's becoming, like, more to his liking. And Sainz was on the other side, like, saying, like, well, the car's different, doesn't mean it's better. And so far, I think, yeah, right, if it wasn't for the appendix of Sainz last race, it would be very highly likely that, Sainz could lead the championship. If he got a good result, I think if he would have been P4 or above, he would have been leading the championship, which is, well, that's crazy, right? And Sainz has delivered 2 out of 2 races so far. He was on the podium in Bahrain, beating Leclerc. Of course, Leclerc had his, brake issue, but still, he beat Leclerc in his qualifying, that's his specialty. And it was a solid weekend from Sainz, and it was almost a domination in the race after Verstappen retired. He was just managing the pace, managing the tires. It was just, full control. Nothing to say. See you later. See you in Japan.
He kept extending the stints as well. So to get the gap, and he did amazingly, especially considering 2 weeks after his surgery, he delivered a monster performance. And as a Ferrari fan, I couldn't be happier than a 1-2. But it's been a good example of really how strong recency bias is in the amongst F1 fans. Because I mean, overall, I feel like Ferrari fans are pretty united in a lot of things. We like both drivers. We're glad when they do well, but especially on social media, you see these kind of cults of either Sainz or Leclerc really pitted against each other. And all of the Instagram comments under Ferrari posts are, "Why didn't you not renew his contract? You fired the wrong driver," which is crazy to me because of course they're still competitors, but they're teammates first and foremost. So
yeah.
And now people are saying Leclerc is washed, even though, as we said, 7 races in a row, he was on the front row in qualifying. But no, I'm excited to see what happens next with Ferrari, because from what I've seen, they're moving up the upgrades that were supposed to arrive in Imola. They're going to arrive in Japan.
Really?
And yeah,
wow.
And Fred Vasseur has actually been saying that the car is very strong. And people were saying that the car looks kind of boring, or basic in the preseason testing, because it didn't look as aggressive as some of the Mercedes or Aston Martin designs. But now they found that though it's basic, it's also very kind of not simple, but you can develop it in a good way to find more pace. And that's what they have been doing. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's with Ferrari, it's an interesting story because, of course, we had these pretty big rumors that Ferrari is gonna come with an undercut concept, and it's gonna be a lot faster than last year, and it's gonna change a lot. And so far, they have delivered, right? Their I think tire degradation has been the best. I think in Jeddah, in Australia, it seemed pretty great too, as you said. Sainz extending all his stints, and we saw Perez, and he was nowhere again. This is the Perez from last year once again. It is not the Perez of the last few races, I think.
But to be fair, Red Bull has been saying that Perez got a tariff stuck in his floor during the race. But he was pretty quick when catching Alonso. But after that, the pace really went down.
He just couldn't get away from him.
Yeah, 2/10 a lap or something.
2/10 a lap. Well, the Red Bull should be 5/10 a lap quicker. So
yeah, well.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, but as you said, when you saw Perez just passing by Hamilton, it was like nothing. It was like it was a GP2 car. But yeah, it was a weird one because we didn't see the true potential, I think, of Red Bull, because we saw that Verstappen had his issue. He had his brake pads stuck together or something on the rear brakes. The drum then exploded and it overheated, and because everybody was super happy, we were cheering, oh, finally we have a battle on our hands. But yeah, the joy, I think for the past year and a bit, we were thinking that when Verstappen is out of the race, we were like, oh my god, if only Verstappen was not there, it would be such an amazing race. And I think that there's more to it than only Verstappen.
Yep.
If Verstappen is not there, it doesn't guarantee a great race. And I think Australia was a pretty good demonstrator, because I think that after a few laps, it was one of the more boring races rather than being an exciting one, except for maybe some, latter stages where you had the Norris versus Leclerc kind of battle, and, Piastri and Norris, little drama. Was not really drama, but yeah, it was a shame in terms of Piastri because, podium in his home race. Definitely. That would have been amazing. The first Australian to ever do it. But yeah, it's not been the greatest of races. And I think it's also because of how, the thinking of these regulations was that so you generate as much downforce as you can through the floor, right? So you have not much dirty air going on to the second car following you. But the cars have gotten so advanced that again, it's producing much more dirty air than it was like predicted. And I think you had Ollie Behrman, last race. He was saying he was super surprised of how much downforce the car ahead of you steals. Because when he was driving for the first time in the Ferrari, he was stuck behind, I think it was Tsunoda or someone, but he just couldn't overtake because he was so surprised of how, the car ahead just put so much dirty air on you, and he couldn't do anything. He was very struck by that. So seems like there's much more, wrong with these regulations again. I don't know. It's a difficult one, but Verstappen going out of the race maybe, had some people enjoy for a few moments, and maybe at the end not having to listen to the Max Verstappen podcast and the Dutch national anthem for like the 100th time. But yeah, it was a domination from Sainz, and there was not much fight for the podiums either. Like after, you just could see that Norris couldn't get that close to Leclerc. Leclerc was kind of, in his third stint, he was just putting fastest laps, and he was just, going away. And not even the midfield delivered as much as they would in different races, right? You didn't have anyone particularly fighting apart from, as you said, Albon and Hulkenberg and Magnussen, but apart from that, there was not much going on.
No, that's a really good point. I agree with the fact that just because Max Verstappen DNF doesn't guarantee a good race. And it's a lot of dirty air, and the cars are really heavy as well, and wide as well, which is a criticism that a lot of people have been raising, that just cars are just too big, and
too heavy.
Be something, This should be something that is addressed by the potential future regulations. I mean, we'll see how the new 2026 power unit regulations change.
Yeah, funnily enough, I think many teams are being very negative of the 2026 regulations right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think Horner said that. I mean, it's not exactly the most, let's say the most trusted reference, because I think he said it in every single regulation, but I think it just shows that they're falling behind a little bit on their plans. But like he said that it's gonna kill the racing again, because when Verstappen talked about the new regulations, he said that he was trying it on the simulator and that it's faster when you lift off the throttle going at the end of the straight than it would be when you had your full throttle. It's just a weird I think it's just because it's because of the electricity. Like you will have so much more power generating through the electric motors rather than the combustion engine, and I think that's going to be a big problem because, of course, you're going to have a lot more management. You're going to have probably a lot of overheating as well, because the energy, it needs to be recuperated somewhere from somehow. It's pretty complicated, and it's not a good thing that the ICEs, the internal combustion engine, are going to be decreasing in power rather than increasing. So, but we'll see. Hopefully, the regulations will be different than what people say. So hopefully we can see some better racing.
I mean, hopefully it'll at least change the pecking order somehow,
Yeah.
It's a good question, how will Red Bull power trains turn out? Or whether Ferrari or Mercedes or even McLaren will turn out with the strongest package.
You never know. Because I think that so far the rumor is that Mercedes are the best off in terms of their engine regulations. Well, it was also the rumor in 2020, at the end of 2021, that for the ground effect rules, Mercedes is the better off than anyone else. And that Red Bull is washed. Look how that turned out to be.
Yeah.
Not a great one. Not a great example. But we'll see. I think that's also the part of why there are so many rumors that Verstappen is going to go to Mercedes. Because if you have to choose a team, if there is any reason you have to leave Red Bull, because I don't think that Verstappen wants to voluntarily leave Red Bull right now. There is zero reason. But if he had to choose a team, what would he have to choose? Ferrari is full. right? Like Ferrari is looking like to be the second best team right now. McLaren, they're also committed to Piastri and Norris. Where else would he go? Aston Martin?
No, that's a good question. And I mean, since we're talking about the Red Bull seats, the second seat next to Max Verstappen for 2025 is a big question as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because now there've been news of or rumors about Carlos Sainz being a potential candidate, which seems pretty obvious because he's delivering. He's at the top of his form right now. Even 2 weeks after surgery, he's delivering results. But you have so many people who are trying to get into that Red Bull seat. You have Ricciardo, which is a whole nother story. Ricciardo is... I mean, it's only been 3 races so far, but he really is somewhat underperforming in comparison to Yuki Tsunoda, who had a great weekend, finishing P7 after Alonso's penalty, which are really valuable points.
Yeah, I mean, he has 6
RB.
points on the board already versus Ricciardo's 0. And I've heard also that Helmut Marko has given Daniel Ricciardo an ultimatum, just saying, you have until Chinese Grand Prix to just, kind of figure out yourself, deliver some points, or otherwise there is the threat of Liam Lawson stepping into that seat in Miami, which is a valid point. I think Ricciardo said that the car hasn't changed particularly much, even though it looks like it. And from the preseason tests, we had the thinking of like, oh, is this going to be the RB19 or... Yeah, but the car didn't change, which is even more of a reason for him to understand it. And, just to be experienced enough. He's no Nick De Vries. He is an experienced driver. He's an 8-time Grand Prix winner. He has beaten Verstappen 2 seasons in a Red Bull seat, although one arguably, he wasn't there for the full time, but he is a quality driver. But as Horner said, he just lost his way somewhere. And, the Red Bull seat, like Checo's seat, it's a very hot seat. I think like if Checo doesn't perform, there's many candidates, as you said, Sainz, because Horner said that you have a very fast unemployed driver, here. So sometimes you have to look outside of your pool. So I think that Sainz is going to be a good target for next year as well. Checo's contract is ending this year. So we'll see about that as well. I think that's going to be one of the good things about the silly season. It's going to be exciting to watch who's going to end up as Verstappen's teammate. Or you never know, if Verstappen decides not to be in the seat anymore, who's going to be in Red Bull?
I mean, there's also been talks about Alonso going to Red Bull, right?
Yeah.
With Yuki potentially going to Aston Martin, as per the Honda partnership. But it really does look like the 2024 silly season is going to be very entertaining because a lot of contracts are ending. And we saw that even when contracts aren't supposed to end, things can change, as with Hamilton.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And Hamilton is, I think, one of the people who's going to be so excited for the 2024 seat because he had a pretty shocking weekend, to be honest. Like, for Hamilton standards, it's and for Mercedes standards, to go away from Australia with 0 points, that's a tough one. And as Toto Wolff said, I think he said something like, "I want to punch myself in the nose" or something. He's clearly very, very upset about the weekend, and I think he has a lot of reasons to, because the car, it just, they were talking about it so much. They were so vocal about it being like so different to the predecessors, and to finally nailing down the good base of the car, which is something that Ferrari really nailed this year. As you said, the base of the car just being really, really solid. Yeah, but Hamilton is feeling absolutely terrible with the car. He's not feeling at 1. He had a pretty bad qualifying, P11. Tsunoda out-qualifying him in the V-Carb, which is that's a shocker for sure.
Yeah.
And in the race, did he make much progress? I don't think so. He was on a different strategy, but I don't think for Hamilton, I don't think he really cares whether it's P4, 5, 6, 10. He just wants to win. So, And he had an engine failure that was just all of a sudden, just came from nowhere. When you listen to the onboards, it was just going all pretty smoothly and just randomly it gave up. And then you had Russell, who crashed out. And you want to know a funny statistic, Tonda?
I'm all ears.
Sainz had 3 race wins, right? His first race win, Silverstone 2022. Russell crashed in the opening lap. Verstappen had an issue. And Sainz won. Then, you had the Singapore Grand Prix 2023. Red Bull had problems with their car, right? They couldn't make it behave. Russell went for the gap and crashed out. And Sainz won. And guess what happened in Australia? Verstappen problem, Russell crashing out, and Sainz winning. Coincidence? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, we just have to wait to see what will be the next race that all of this happens again. And yeah. I think, funnily enough, last time at the Singapore Grand Prix, the next Grand Prix was Suzuka as well.
Yeah.
So these parallels are... And with George Russell crashing, I saw a clip that as soon as Crofty says, and you can hear the crowds roar.
Yeah.
He crashes. I don't know if he's listening to the broadcast and getting distracted. No, but this time it's been controversial with Alonso and his 20-second penalty, right?
Yeah. What did you think of that? Like my initial thought was Russell lost it. Like dirty air,
yeah.
Mercedes snappy rear end, he just lost it. That was my initial thought. What did you think?
Well, mine as well, but then when I saw some of the write-ups from the stewards and the decision made, it makes sense, in a sense that if Alonso really did brake check him, in a corner like this, and it led to Russell crashing the way he did, and being stranded in the middle of the track with the wheels under the car being on the side, I feel like it's a fair penalty to give if, for causing a collision like that.
I'm on the other side. I looked at the onboards and like the telemetry, right? I think that because Alonso is using every bit of whatever he has to just use against their opponents, but what Alonso was just trying to do, because I think he felt Russell being closer to him than the previous lap, and he was just trying to brake sooner to prepare the exit so that he could, that's a common technique of the drivers. Like when you see somebody just, kind of being too close, you want to kind of brake. It's not like a real brake check, but you just want to brake a little bit so that he has to avoid you. He just has to press on the braking and he has to slow down. And when he does that, you just go full beans. You just go out of the corner and you just, he can never catch you when you do this. Like preparing the exit. But of course it's controversial, but I think that it was Alonso's corner. And he has the right
definitely.
He has the right to, not brake whenever he wants, but when you look at this penalty, right? When you remember Perez in 2021 in Abu Dhabi, he was slowing down Hamilton just a few seconds a lap, or even Magnussen doing this in Saudi Arabia, right? Checo never got a penalty, right? They were trying to say, oh, it was a dangerous driving and everything, but he was driving very slow. Of course, arguably it was different corners, right? Because in Australia it was a high-speed corner. It looked like a big shunt, but in the end it was all good. But yeah, it's again, I think what we mentioned in the last podcast is just the consistency. Like, it appears not to be here. Because if this is a penalty, then Magnussen should have received the penalty for driving dangerously in the first sector, because Jeddah is a fast racetrack as well. It's weird. I thought it was pretty strange, because I don't think if they would crash, I would understand the penalty if Alonso just braked too early and kind of brake checking Russell and making him run into him. But in the end, Russell lost it on his own. He didn't really make any contact with Alonso. And he also didn't lose it under braking. He lost it in the turn when he was trying to accelerate. which just shows the characteristics of the Mercedes car. And also of probably Russell, who just, when he's in the heat of these last lap battles, he just seems kind of carried away. We saw that in Singapore. We saw that today. He just, he just goes for it and sometimes makes mistakes like these. So I thought that the penalty for Alonso was not really fair, to be honest.
No, that's a good point. I mean, to be honest, I don't have too strong of an opinion on this, but just a side note, I saw a video on YouTube like 2 days ago, which was Alonso brake checking somebody in like 2006 and them crashing out. And it was, I don't know if the algorithm, if a lot of people have been watching related content, but it's just...
The YouTube algorithm striking again.
Yeah. Let's just say that Alonso has never been known as the driver who only uses the cleanest methods to get his, to get his way.
I think Alonso isn't particularly a dirty driver, but I think he uses a lot of gray area. I think that's what Alonso can do. He's pretty good at that.
Sometimes it's a little further, like Crashgate and the cheating scandal, but Spygate. But it's, but his career spans such a vast amount of time that people kind of also just forget, this is the same Alonso that was doing these things in 2007. And
Formula One has changed a lot since, so it's crazy. I mean, you have to also think about how difficult it is for these drivers, like Alonso, Hamilton used to be Vettel, right? Raikkonen, how they had to adapt through different years. I think it was 2019 in Monza, where Hamilton also mentioned the fact where he was battling with Leclerc, and Leclerc kind of pushed him off, and he received a black and white flag. And I think Hamilton said that you were not allowed to do that a few years back, right? Like before that, like in 2010s or 2000s. Because when that happened, something similar happened in, I think it was Spa 2008, when Hamilton was battling Raikkonen, and Raikkonen, he kind of pushed Hamilton off, but Hamilton just like cut the corner. He then let Raikkonen through, and then he immediately just slipstreamed him and sent it on him in the first corner, and then he went to win the race, and he received a 20-second post-race penalty just because he cut the chicane, which cost it gained him about 2 seconds. And because of that, he was demoted, I think, to, I don't know if he was even second or third or something, but it cost him points, and that was a strange one. So the consistency over the years, like for long-term fans, I think it is very confusing in terms of this. So I would hope they get a better grip on what is clearly allowed and what is not. So same as, the track limits, for example. Speaking of consistency, Sauber, or the Kick Sauber stake, whatever you want to call them, third time in a row, they had a terrible pit stop. And it was Bottas. I think that's traditions right there, isn't it?
No, it's really upsetting. And especially, they seem like they have decent pace. And they did as well in Jeddah and Bahrain. And I put both of them in my F1 fantasy team. Because I trust that they will learn from their mistakes, but the pit stops are just, I've been reading from that Bottas has been saying that it's an issue with the materials, that they started using some new equipment that is faster or something that the top teams use, but I guess it's so fast that it just causes threading on the bolts, and it's just. I mean, imagine being Bottas, though. How many times has this happened to him now? And it's not something that should be happening as often as it does.
I think if there was a prize for, we have the DHL fastest pit stop, right?
Yeah.
I think we need something opposite. Like some delivery services that is super slow and just giving the slowest pit stop. Because you had Bottas in 2021 in Monaco having this terrible pit stop. I think it was the record time. Like for a few days, they just couldn't put the freaking gun out of the wheel. They just couldn't get the nut. from the tire. But Jesus, why does it always have to be Bottas? Last time it was Joe.
No,
but Jesus, get it sorted. Like, they don't have a terrible car. They could have been in the mix if Haas had double points. I'm pretty sure they could have done something. They don't have bad drivers. They don't have Mr. Latifi driving in that seat. Bottas is pretty capable in his good days, but Jesus, these pit stops cost them just so much. And even as we mentioned, right, like the midfield or the second half of the grid, if you want to call them, the best of the rest, they're going to have to fight for every single point because the top 5 teams are just so good that you have 5 teams, 2 drivers each, that's your top 10, like consistently, right? Unless somebody retires or has a terrible weekend. It's days like these that Sauber is going to be looking back at and be like, yep, that's what cost us the 6th place in the championship.
No, exactly. And especially the fact that it's something to do with their equipment is kind of worrying, because that means that it's an issue that's probably going to be ongoing through the rest of the season, and I just have to deal with it. I don't know. I feel like it's a very good argument for Andretti to be let in as an 11th team, considering, Williams, they don't even have 2 cars.
Yeah.
Kick Sauber, they have their pit stop equipment causes them to have like 15-second pit stops.
Terrible.
And they're saying that Andretti isn't on the level necessary to join as a constructor.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a little...
It's crazy. I mean, it's Formula 1, right? And of course, these things happen. But they can't happen to you 3 races in a row and consistently costing you. I think that is crazy. Because if you look at the championship, even from the top, it's fairly close. Have you looked at the standings? Leclerc is only 4 points behind Verstappen, which I think according to one statistic, it is the closest championship after 3 rounds since 2013.
Yeah, I saw the same statistic. But we have to remember how the rest of 2013 went.
Yeah. Was it like 7 or 9 races in 9 races in a row from Vettel? He won, right?
9. I'm pretty sure.
Jesus, yeah. That is, I mean, when you look at 2022 as well, Leclerc had almost a 40-point, or maybe even more, 40-point lead over Russell. And Verstappen was not even in top 5 in the standings. He was over 50 points down. And how that turned out, not so well. So
it's a painful memory.
Yeah.
It's a painful memory.
I mean, every point counts, right? Like, because we remember 2022, Ferrari had these issues, not finishing races, either from reliability side or Leclerc just binning it was France from the lead. And this is just, those are the moments that cost you. And for a team like Sauber, it's even more important just to be there when there's opportunity for the points, because they're not going to occur everywhere. I think in Suzuka, it's going to be a very different story, because, yeah, I smell a domination from Verstappen in Suzuka, because the Red Bull is insanely good in the high speed. I think, as we saw in Jeddah as well. And I think that Mercedes is going to struggle in Suzuka, because if you look at Hamilton, he has no confidence in the rear end in the fast corners, and Russell binned it in one of the high speed corners. So I think McLaren also is going to be in the mix, because they seem to be fairly strong. Like, I don't think they had any upgrades per se, but they have been pretty strong in, out of the box, which is unusual for them, from the start of the season, because they have also these upgrades scheduled for, I think it's the second, or was it the 4th race? So it's China or Imola, so. somewhere around. It's been speculation. So Suzuka, I don't know. I just don't feel there's gonna be as much room for any outside of the top 5 teams to score many points. So,
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see. What do you think about Suzuka?
Oh yes, Suzuka will be interesting because a lot of teams are bringing some upgrades. Some, as I said, Ferrari are supposed to bring a pretty significant upgrade, as well as Red Bull. So
oh my god.
We'll see. Maybe they turn up with the zero side pod,
Please no.
mode. But it's gonna be interesting.
It's worrying. It is fairly worrying to hear Red Bull bringing significant upgrades. Yep. You know that, Adrian Newey never messes around. And when you have significant upgrades, they usually work. Like, it's not like trial and error. They know what they're doing. So, yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical of Japan, but, never say never. We'll see. I hope that Ferrari upgrades are going to be even more powerful. So we have, a championship battle for change on our hands. At least so it looks like on the standings.
Yeah, so far, yes. And I mean, last week we talked about the rumors of Christian Horner being fired before Australia.
Yeah.
So I guess now we can see if it's going to happen before Suzuka. But it looks like that they weathered that storm. But I mean, the employee is now appealing against Horner. Yep. So that's still an ongoing thing. But I feel like it has largely gone away in the public perception. It's not being talked about as much. Helmut Marko is back to talking about the RB drivers. So It seems like they've actually managed to do okay. I mean, unless there's something going on behind the scenes with Jos Verstappen and these people.
And with him, you never know. I think that I've read about the employee being suspended, until further notice. So it's being dealt with, but yeah, I mean, we're just going to have the rumors like all the time. I think that speculations are always going to happen, but it just doesn't seem like the duo or trio, or I don't know what you want to call it, like just Verstappen with Horner and Helmut. Maybe with Newey. I've heard that Newey has been offered a contract in Ferrari, which would be, that would be interesting news to see him work with Hamilton and Ferrari for the first time in his career. That would be a good career ender. In a good way, not in a bad way.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully no zero pod Mercedes Ferrari car. That would be insane. But I mean, there can be a lot of interesting things, happening. Like, of course, Newey's not going to go to Alpine, like I think.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's I mean, unless he wants like the ultimate challenge, the hardcore, super difficult challenge. I don't know. We will see about that as well. But I think that it's going to be super interesting to watch like what's going on. But so far, it's when you look at them like on the track, it just seems like everything is firing up on all cylinders and it's all going pretty well. Like apart from this little reliability issue.
All right. Well, I think that's enough to cover the Australian Grand Prix, and we'll see what happens in 2 weeks' time in Suzuka. If Max's dominance comes back after one mishap, or if we actually see a battle for once.
Let's stay tuned. Well, let's pray that it's going to be a lot more interesting than any other race this season, because we were definitely looking forward to that.
Well, thank you for listening to the Final Straight F1 podcast, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.